Okay, let's get into this. There's this kind of strange situation, isn't there? You see tons of news about all these new electric cars. I mean, more models than ever.
Right, the market seems flooded with options.
Exactly. But then you look at some other numbers, and it feels like maybe, just maybe, the public's excitement about actually buying one, well, it isn't really keeping up. Might even be going down.
It's a bit of a paradox. More choice doesn't automatically mean more people rushing out to buy, at least not across the board.
Right. So that's what we're diving into today. We've got these recent studies you shared looking specifically at why Americans might be holding back on EVs, despite all the shiny new options.
Yeah, the goal is to unpack what the data actually says are the main concerns. What's really driving this hesitation?
But we've got two main sources, right, giving slightly different angles.
That's right. One's a broad look, general population kind of thing. The other focuses more on people who are actively considering a new car purchase soon.
Okay, let's start with the wide view then. That AAA study from March this year surveyed, over 1,000 adults. What was the big takeaway there on buying likelihood?
Well, the main finding was pretty stark, actually. Only 16% of U.S. adults said they were likely or very likely to choose an EV for their next car.
16%. Wow.
Yeah, and what really stands out is that's the lowest number AAA has seen since 2019, so, pre-pandemic levels.
Lowest in 5 years. Okay, so the flip side must mean more people are actively saying no thanks.
Significantly more, yeah. The study found 63% are now saying they're unlikely or very unlikely to buy an EV next.
63.
And that's up from 51% just 4 years back. So that's a pretty noticeable increase in stated reluctance from the general public.
Okay, so general interest seems to have cooled a bit. The big question then is why? What reasons did people give in that AAA study for, pumping the brakes?
The reasons were very practical, mostly centered around cost and just the day-to-day reality of owning one. The top two concerns: high battery repair costs, that was cited by 62%.
62, okay.
And the higher initial purchase price. That was a barrier for 59%.
So cost, both upfront and potential future cost, is huge. What else came up a lot? Any other big practical worries?
Oh, yeah. Beyond the money, it was really about usability and charging. Things like worries about long trips or just general charging availability fears. That was 57%.
Still very high.
Right. And then lack of convenient public charging spots specifically, 56% mentioned that. And that fear of, getting stranded somewhere with a dead battery, 55%.
Makes sense.
Even just figuring out home charging installation was an issue for about 27%.
So it really sounds like the nuts and bolts of ownership are causing some real hesitation. Did the AAA study ask about overall confidence? Like, do people still think EVs are the future?
It did. And that confidence seems to have taken a hit, too. The belief that EVs will actually outsell gasoline cars within the next 10 years, that dropped quite a bit.
How much?
It went from 40% thinking that way back in 2022 down to only 23% today.
Wow. Okay, so that suggests maybe people are rethinking how fast this whole transition is going to happen.
Seems like it, yeah. Public expectation might be shifting.
All right, so that's the general population view from AAA. Now, what about that other study, the J.D. Power one? That focused on people already thinking about buying a car, right? Did it show something different?
It did offer a slightly different angle, mainly because of who they talked to. These are active shoppers. J.D. Power found that among those prospective buyers, 24% were very likely to consider an EV.
Okay, 24% very likely.
And another 35% were somewhat likely. Now, the interesting part here is that this level of consideration among this group has stayed pretty much the same as last year.
Ah, okay. So maybe the people already in the market, the sort of core group thinking about a new car, they're holding steady, while the wider public is where the hesitation is growing.
That seems to be a key difference when you look at both studies together. It suggests the pool of active considerers might be more stable.
But did the studies agree on anything?
Oh, definitely. Charging infrastructure. That came through loud and clear in both. J.D. Power also found that 52% of those prospective buyers still see charging availability as a major pain point.
So that charging piece is just unavoidable. Everyone's worried about it.
Pretty much seems that way, yes.
And what about the purchase price concern? Was that as high in the J.D. Power study among active shoppers?
Actually, no. It was lower. J.D. Power found 43% citing high price as a reason to avoid EVs. Compare that to the 59% in the AAA general population study.
43 versus 59. Why the difference, do you think?
Well, it could be that people actively shopping have maybe already zeroed in on models they think they can afford, or perhaps they're looking in segments where that price gap between gas and electric isn't quite as wide, or
Yeah.
maybe they've just come to terms with the current pricing more.
Interesting. So if we try and pull all this together,
Yeah.
what's the main story these studies are telling us about where things stand with EVs in the U.S. right now?
I think the picture is, well, the industry's definitely delivered on variety, lots of models out there, but they haven't quite sealed the deal for the average American buyer yet.
Right.
The data really points to a big chunk of the general public having these very real practical worries. It's about cost certainty, like what will that battery cost down the road? It's about the initial price hurdle. And crucially, it's about reliable, easy to find charging.
So even if the committed shoppers are still considering EVs at roughly the same rate.
Exactly. Those core anxieties about cost and charging are still significant barriers for broader adoption. They haven't gone away.
It really underlines that challenge, doesn't it? Moving beyond the early adopter crowd means needing to tackle these very specific fears head on.
Yeah.
The cost questions, the charging convenience.
Absolutely. Understanding these specific points of hesitation is, I think, key to seeing the hurdles the auto industry still needs to clear to get more people into EVs.
Definitely food for thought. So, thinking about everything we've just discussed, battery costs, upfront price, range worries, finding a charger easily. What's the number one thing for you listening right now that's pushing you towards potentially owning an EV, or maybe pushing you away? Something to mull over.